Title: When I planted a bug on my wife's clothes, I never imagined the betrayal I'd uncover. She was sneaking off to cheap motels with her lover, laughing at my expense. But I didn't just confront them. I turned their lives upside down. From public humiliation to taking back my self-worth, this is the story of how I turned heartbreak into revenge and found a new beginning. Let's start the story. You're so insecure these days. My wife, Julia, snapped, brushing her hair in the mirror. Her tone carried that cold detachment I had grown used to over the past few months. I stood at the doorway of our bedroom, watching her get ready. She looked perfect, too perfect for someone heading to a book club meeting. It's not insecurity, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I just feel like we've been distant lately. You're always going out, staying late. She rolled her eyes. That's your problem, Ethan. You're so paranoid. Maybe if you got a hobby or did something useful with your time, you wouldn't have to obsess over me. Her words cut like a knife. Julia had always been sharp-tongued, but lately there was an edge to her that felt more like contempt. I wanted to believe she was just stressed. But the late nights, the secretive phone calls, and her sudden obsession with her appearance all pointed to one thing. She was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. That night, after she had fallen asleep, I retrieved the small GPS tracker I had ordered online. It was discreet, no bigger than a coin, and could easily be attached to her coat or purse. I hesitated for a moment. Was this too far? Would it make me the bad guy? But then I thought about the way she had been treating me, how distant and dismissive she had become. The next morning, as she got ready for another meeting, I slipped the tracker into the lining of her coat. My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. She didn't suspect a thing. The first day, the tracker showed nothing unusual. Her workplace, the grocery store, home. I almost convinced myself that I was overthinking. But on Thursday night, everything changed. At 7:45 p.m., her location popped up on my phone. She wasn't at the bookstore where her club supposedly met. She was at a cheap motel on the other side of town. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, hoping it was a glitch, but the location stayed the same. My hands trembled as I grabbed my car keys. I wasn't just going to sit there and wonder. I needed to see it with my own eyes. When I arrived, her car was parked outside the motel, alongside a sleek black sedan. My pulse thundered in my ears as I stood outside the building, staring at the glowing vacancy sign. I didn't barge in immediately. Instead, I pulled out my phone and connected to the hidden microphone I had slipped into her coat alongside the tracker. The audio was crystal clear. I could hear Julia laughing, her voice light and flirtatious. A man's voice joined hers, deeper, smoother. They were talking about how careful they needed to be, how they didn't want anyone to find out. Then I heard something that made my blood boil. Your husband is so clueless, Julia. He'll never figure this out. And she laughed. She laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. I hit the record button on my phone and walked back to my car, my mind racing with anger, pain, and a grim sense of purpose. This wasn't going to end here. The next morning, I walked into the office of her lover, Paul Bennett, the smug executive who thought he could steal my wife and walk away unscathed. His secretary tried to stop me, but I didn't care. I burst into his corner office, slamming a DVD onto his desk. "What the hell is this?" Paul asked, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "Press play," I said, my voice ice cold. He hesitated, but curiosity got the better of him. As the video played, his smirk vanished. It was all there, every word, every laugh, every kiss. "You son of a—" he began, but I cut him off. "Save it," I snarled. "Here's the deal. I've got copies of this video ready to send to your wife, your kids, your boss. Hell, I'll post it on social media if I have to. So here's my question. Should I start with your wife or save this for Thanksgiving dinner? Paul paled, his confident demeanor crumbling. Wait, let's talk about this. We can work something out. Oh, we're done talking, I said, turning to leave. Consider this your first and final warning. When I got home, Julia was waiting for me. She looked nervous, like she knew something was wrong. What's going on? She asked, trying to sound casual. Oh, nothing much, I said, dropping a manila envelope on the table. Just some divorce papers. You'll want to read them carefully. Her eyes widened as she opened the envelope. Inside were the papers, along with a copy of the video. You followed me? She stammered, her voice trembling. I trusted you, I said, my voice heavy with disappointment. And you threw it all away. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about me taking back my dignity, my life. 2 weeks later, Paul's wife filed for divorce, his company launched an internal investigation, and Julia moved out of our house. As for me, I found peace. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from the lies, the manipulation, the constant feeling of not being enough. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone else, it's about reclaiming yourself. And I had done just that. After the dust settled, life began to move forward, though not without a few complications. Julia, for all her defiance, tried to claw her way back into my life, claiming that her betrayal was just a mistake, and that we could work things out. It wasn't love, Ethan, she pleaded one rainy afternoon as she stood outside my apartment door. It was a stupid fling. He didn't mean anything to me. I stared at her, unmoved. Funny. He seemed pretty important when you laughed at me with him in that motel room. Her face twisted with guilt, but it was too late. I wasn't the doormat she thought I'd always be. You made your choice, Julia, I said firmly. And I've made mine. Good luck with your life, without me in it. I closed the door, her cries muffled on the other side. That moment marked the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. Meanwhile, Paul Bennett's life took a nosedive. His wife, a sharp and resourceful woman, not only filed for divorce but also exposed his infidelity to his boss. With his personal life in shambles and his professional reputation in tatters, Paul quickly went from a respected executive to a cautionary tale in his company. It didn't end there. The internal investigation revealed that Paul had been using company funds for his illicit rendezvous with Julia. Expensive dinners, motel stays, even gifts. The company had no choice but to terminate him, and news of the scandal spread like wildfire. One day I ran into him at a coffee shop, his once polished suit now replaced with something wrinkled and cheap. He avoided my gaze, but I couldn't resist. How's the new job hunt going, Paul? I asked, a satisfied smirk on my face. He mumbled something unintelligible and slunk away, leaving his coffee untouched. For months, I thought the story would end there. But one day, I received a handwritten letter from Paul's ex-wife, Melanie. Ethan, I don't know if this letter will ever reach you, but I wanted to thank you. If you hadn't exposed Paul's betrayal, I would have continued living a lie. It was painful, but it gave me the chance to rebuild my life and start fresh. If you ever need a friend or just someone to talk to, don't hesitate to reach out. Best, Melanie. Her words stayed with me. She wasn't bitter or angry. She was just someone who had been hurt and was trying to heal, just like I was. We exchanged a few emails, then phone calls. Over time, we met for coffee. What started as two wounded people sharing their stories slowly blossomed into something I hadn't expected. A real connection. Months turned into a year, and Melanie and I found ourselves leaning on each other more and more. She was nothing like Julia, kind, genuine, and supportive. She had been through hell, but she didn't let it harden her heart. One evening, as we walked through the park, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about what happened, what they did to us?" I nodded. "Sometimes, but not as much as I used to." "Me neither," she said with a smile. "I guess that's what healing feels like." We stopped under a street lamp, and she took my hand. "I'm glad you found me, Ethan. Or maybe I found you." For the first time in years, I felt whole. Looking back, I realized that exposing Julia and Paul wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my self-worth and moving on. The pain they caused me had forced me to confront what I truly deserved in life. Revenge may have been the spark, but healing was the fire that lit my path forward. As I sat across from Melanie at dinner one evening, laughing over some silly joke, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Sometimes life gives you a second chance, not to fix what's broken, but to build something better. And I wasn't going to waste it. Thank you for being a part of this story with me. If it moved you, please give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to Narrative Stories. I've noticed many of you who enjoy these stories aren't subscribed yet. By subscribing, you're not just following a channel. You're becoming part of a community that values deep, meaningful storytelling. Let's continue exploring these heartfelt journeys together. Don't forget to